Welcome to Life on Life's Terms, episode 28. We have Brock Balszczyk in today, who served 7 years in the Canadian military. He was with the PPCLI, 1st Battalion, served in Afghanistan, and he's also the fellow who confronted Justin Trudeau in an Edmonton town hall about Veterans Affairs. How's your day going today, Brock?
It's going good. Thanks for having me on the show, Justin.
My pleasure, man. I'm glad that we reached out and this came down the way that it came down, you know? So you're enjoying that warm sun out there? Or the smoke that we've been inhaling here in Alberta?
Oh, yeah. That's been great. I'm a smoker anyway, so my lungs are already immune to it.
So how's life been since... well, let's talk about... What was it that brought you into the military? Let's start there. How about there?
Okay, yeah. It was I was 18. You know, of course I was in cadets and everything like that. I grew up in a small town in northern Alberta, and it was it's the quickest way out, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was on my 18th birthday. I just signed an application. Like, I was in cadets and everything too, so I kind of liked the military thing. I liked the structure, you know, and everything like that. And, you know, I figured, you know, what could be 3 years, because that's what your first contract is in Canada anyways. When you're going into combat arms trades like infantry, which I was. And, so I just put my application in, and, you know, growing up in Alberta, it's either, for most people, it's either the oil patch or the military, and the military was just the thing that called first. Yeah. That's really how I look at it.
So how was basic training for you?
Basic training was a breeze.
Really?
It was battle school. Doing infantry battle school, that was way worse.
Really, eh?
Oh, yeah.
What was that like on a day-to-day?
Well, it's you know, when you're doing military training and stuff like that, a lot of it is it's realized, like, looking back on it now, I realized that it was just to set me up to see how far my body can actually go and make you realize how far you can actually go on. No sleep deprivation, you know, your instructor's kind of playing mind games with you and everything like that, you know, so it was a challenge.
Did it enforce kind of like a team mentality between you and the other guys that were around you going through that battle school?
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, you know, when you're in a fraternity like the military, when you're experiencing the same things, you know, going through the same hardships, you know, it's that bond, right? That really makes you close. Like, I still talk to quite a few guys that I went to battle school with and everything like that.
Okay. Where did battle school happen in the context of Canada?
Here in Alberta.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So was it like a desert setting kind of?
It was like out in Wainwright.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's the PPCLI infantry battle school out there. Some guys do it in Manitoba.
So I keep forgetting. You should probably tell the listeners, especially those Americans, what PPCLI stands for.
Okay, so in the Canadian military, it's a lot like the British military, where, you know, we don't have numbers to name our regiments like the Americans do. We have names, and PPCLI stands for Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. You know.
And 1st Battalion means?
1st Battalion is the 1st Battalion of the regiment. So
you're the ones that get the shit first?
Not totally. So, you know, basically how it works in Canada, usually your first and 2nd battalions are usually what they call mechanized infantry.
Okay.
So we roll around in those tank. You know, you probably seen them on the news. The tanks with wheels, the LAVs.
Yeah.
The light armor fighting vehicle. So we roll around in those, and then your 3rd battalions are usually like the paratroopers and the light infantry guy. They walk everywhere, and it sucks. So
you don't get to. Did you get to jump out of planes?
No. I definitely just preferred rolling around in a vehicle and having my shit carried for me. So
in my early recovery, I was very much addicted to adrenaline.
Yeah.
So I actually started jumping out of planes. in order to accommodate that adrenaline.
Yeah.
Right? I needed that, right? The rush.
It's not the same thing whatsoever. It's more of a hard landing. Like, don't get me wrong, when I first joined the military, like growing up as a kid, I watched Bandit Brothers and, wanted to be airborne and super hard and checked out. And then, once I got in the military, and my 3rd Battalion guys are probably going to hate me for this, but they're all basically a bunch of retards, juice monkeys. We like to compare the 3rd Battalion as like a retarded stepbrother, and they'll fully admit that.
So it's kind of like, well, I was always told, so I have a couple friends who were PPCLI over in the problems over in the Middle East. So, sorry, not Middle East. I want to say Eastern Europe.
Oh, former Yugo days?
Yeah. And so one of my friends he was a jumper, so he'd jump out of planes and stuff. And he was saying the only reason why he got picked for airborne was because he was an asshole.
That's totally how like basically like the airborne, like back in the day when we used to have the airborne regiment here in Canada. That's basically how they picked their guys. It was the guys that the battalions were like, you guys, it was basically the retards sent over there.
Yeah.
The guys that the battalions didn't want to deal with. And it was all like, here you go, son. Here's your posting message to Petawawa or Edmonton or wherever to the airborne. And don't worry, son, the airborne's going to sort you out.
Yeah, exactly. So how long was battle school for?
13 weeks, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And grueling, obviously?
Yeah, it was like, a lot of it was early mornings, late nights, working out 8 hours a day to get you exhausted, and then it's kind of one of those things where you just kind of become brainwashed in a sense, right? You're basically deconstructed through basically being overly tired, and then the military can reconstruct you to the way they want you. So you get very institutionalized and everything like that, right? So,
wow. I can totally empathize with being institutionalized.
Yeah.
I've done my time in incarceration.
Yeah.
so I get what being institutionalized means for somebody mentally, right?
Yeah.
And I get that too, because in jail, when you're being institutionalized in that capacity, what ends up happening is you really forget about the outside world, and that microcosm of the environment that you're in just becomes what you are.
Yeah.
Right? And you live, breathe, and be it, whether you want to be or not, right?
Well, and that's exactly what it is. It really becomes a core to your identity type thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find, it's just, to me, I'll always remember what it was like being a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And it was probably, I would say, one of the greatest, despite what happened to me, it was probably the greatest moments of my life, so far in. And but yeah, it definitely it defines who you are and where you want to go.
And I think that there's a lot of, like, even right now there's a lot of programming available that's called boot camp, so on and so forth. So my co-host Kenny is actually a product of boot camp out of Edmonton Remand Center.
Okay.
So that's how he basically got on the right path to changing his life, right? And I think even people who come like from the old world that I came from, that ability to become strict and become dedicated towards what you're doing and have that discipline in order to keep your nose against the grindstone, so to say, and do what you got to do. I mean, obviously yours was for a service for our country, and I applaud that. I mean, I'm totally in amazement, and I have a lot of gratitude for that. Obviously my way of discipline was not in that capacity. It was about depravity from society at that time. And so I guess the only things that are parallel to each other is the ability to be able to have that kind of discipline.
Yeah, no, and I think honestly, a lot of the guys in the military I met, had similar backgrounds to yours. It's just that, they made the choice to go another route than the other route.
Well, and I think you and I, previous to this podcast, we were talking about the fraternalism.
Yeah.
Right? There's a need for guys who I think are atypical men, which I would say we are. We're that alpha structure, you know what I mean? Where we need to be around other alphas like us in order to either take the lead or be somebody who can lead in another capacity as a team together. Yeah. And we almost strive for that taste when we're like 18, 19, 20 years old. You know?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing too, right? You kind of get, after, you deal with the same shit with each other, like in the military, it's either crappy training or when you go to a theater of war or anything like that, and I've never been on your side of the fence totally before, but I imagine the same. You deal with the same things, other buddies dying from a result of crime or get involved with that, right? So you kind of bleed and everything like that,
It's crazy. I just finished reading a book by Sebastian Junger called Tribe. And so this guy is an ex-Delta guy out of America. And he was talking about how when vets come back from the other side, how they can't establish the same kind of trust with other people because you're dying with each other in a time of high adrenaline. And you're in the flight or fight or freeze response all of the time. It's either 2 kilometers an hour or you're blasting out at 500 kilometers an hour. There's no middle ground.
Yeah, there's no zero,
And that's the same thing on the other side of the world. Like in the organized world that I associated myself with, it was the same thing. And seeing guys die from, maybe they went and did a shutdown. So for us, that would mean, and I kid you not, so like there's some guys in my old world who are ex-military people that would show us or train us how to raid a house. Yeah. Right? And you're basically taking down the other team, stealing their drugs, and shutting them down. That's why we call it a shutdown. Yeah. Right? And so the adrenaline that one might feel prior to kicking in a door and going to go do those kinds of things, you can't express with somebody else. You know what I mean? That's where that band comes together. But I don't think we get that in training. You know what I mean? Per se, we more get that within the actual action itself.
Baptism by fire.
Yeah.
No.
So how long did it take from battle school to get actually deployed? And how many of the guys from battle school were you deployed with?
So actually, my whole graduation class from battle school, I think we started out with 40 and then we graduated at 16. Wow. So that was our dropout rate. But, after that, all of us got posted to the 1st Battalion, and then we all got deployed. Some of us were in the same company, some of us were in a different company, but we all got deployed around the same time.
So how long in your career did that take for all this training?
Yeah, so in Canada it's a little different from the States, because in the States you could basically do your trades training and then you're good to go. You're good to be deployed. In Canada we got to do a check in the box game. So I think I did the math not too long. I think it was about 18 months of actual deployment training we did as a battalion and as a battle group before we went over to Afghanistan.
Wow. That's pretty, like for me to hear that's pretty, how would I say it? Well planned. You know what I mean? Like it allows you guys to get to become more than companions, so to say. You know what I mean? You're not just out there with a stranger.
No.
Hoping that they might remember something from training. Yeah. Right?
No, but that's the thing too, right? It allows, one for, the older guys that have been around battalion and have done tours to train the newer guys such as myself when that time was happening, right?
Shit hits the fan. Yeah.
And and then it creates that team building thing too, like, with the guys in my platoon and everything like that. Pretty much, whatever spare time we have, which wasn't very much when we were training for Afghanistan, we all hung out because we hung out with each other all through training anyways.
Yeah. It's really neat when we can keep that mindset all of the time. You know what I mean? Like it's really, we on the show talk about being in a lion's pride. Yeah. Right? And the second that we see some fucking goat getting pulled out in front of us by their rope, you know what I mean? You're just like, I can't have this prick in my lion's pride. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like this guy just can't do it. I think that's what ends up happening, right? We end up forming these bonds, and the next thing you know, you're like, yeah, I can't deal with this guy. He's not going to be a benefit to the group. Right?
Well, and that's just kind of the thing too. Like, we cut a couple of guys that weren't really fitting in with the group and everything like that. You got to have a well meshed group, right? You know, and I think that's similar to, you know, the other side of the fence as well, you know.
Yeah.
You know, you got that new guy kind of hanging around, and you're kind of, you know, and
Can he do
you know,
this?
you haze the shit out of them to
Yeah.
basically, you know, see if they'll make it, right? You know, and we do the same thing in the military, you know, so.
So how was the feeling when you finally got your walking papers that you were getting deployed?
Scary, but yet exciting at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the thing when you live in that kind of lifestyle, you know, where, you know, your last day could be tomorrow, right? You know, and you're always nervous, but yet, you know, you're always excited at the same time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
You know, that's how I felt anyways.
Every day is Friday and Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Every day is Friday and Monday. Friday, you're going home. Monday, you're just trudging the road to get to Friday.
Yeah,
you know
pretty
what I mean?
much.
Like, yeah, I totally get that. So, did you and the guys that you went to battle school with, did you kind of have did you guys corral with each other prior to your deployment, or did you like go home and see the family? How did that
Well,
look
they give you some leave, right? So at the time I was engaged to a different woman than I'm married to now, but you know, they gave us about 3 weeks before, so I spent a lot of time getting some before I couldn't get some for like 6 months. So
See, there's a difference between my lifestyle and yours. When we get incarcerated, we don't get a chance to get some.
Yeah, exactly.
You're fucking tied up for 2 years at least before anything. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what were your expectations of Afghanistan prior to leaving? Like, what did you think it was going to be like, and what was it not like? You know what I mean? Like for instance, some people think that the life is Goodfellas, and then when they're actually living in the life, they realize that it's not Goodfellas. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like those expectations prior to, right?
Well, of course, you always, you know, think back to the old World War II movies or anything like that, you know, but war is actually 99% boredom. Like sheer absolutely boredom. Like I could not believe you could get bored most times. You know, to the point where you're basically, you know, playing with yourself just to give you 10 minutes to something to do, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, but, you know, and then you get that 1% of absolutely insanity and at the same time awesome that makes up for that 99%. You know, it's that when that adrenaline kicks in.
Yeah.
You know, it just everything just clicks.
So how long were you in Afghanistan, and where did you go within Afghanistan?
So I was in Afghanistan for 6 months out of a 7-month tour. I had about 3 or 4 weeks left before I got hurt. So I was, my company was I was part of Delta Company.
Okay.
Which was just stood up for that battle group. And, you know, I'll continue on with the story later on how that affected everybody and stuff like that. But we were just stood up for that battle group for that tour. And then we were actually stationed in eastern part of Panjwai district in Kandahar province.
Okay.
So it was a pretty insane area, you know, very kind of the heartland of the Taliban, you know, they would say.
Yeah.
And my company was responsible for these 3 villages called Balande, Nakane, and Zalakan. It was just basically made a triangle on the map. And a lot of guys referred to it as the Triangle of Death. Like, before we got there, it was, you know, like, I don't think any real big presence of coalition forces was really involved with that area for 3 years prior to that, I think.
Okay.
And the first 3 months we were there, we found 3 metric tons of IED making material.
Wow.
So there was a lot of bombs in that area.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy. So when you were in that area, did the buildup from what people had called that triangle, did that kind of instill a little bit of fear, or did that put more fight into you?
I think a bit of both, but I think the time, because the French regiment, the Vendus, were actually in Balande before we were. So Balande was kind of our staging ground for the other 2 villages for the first month or so, and then we started our occupation of Nakane. And I think actually the time where I felt kind of legitimate fear, actually, there's these kids that would hang outside of our camp in Balande. And there's one kid, because everybody knew the tanks came and everybody knew that we were going to go into Nakane.
Yeah.
And the tanks rolled in and everything like that. And then this little Afghani kid with broken English kind of pointed and went, Nakane, Nakane. And then he like made like a dirt pile with a stick in it. And he went, Nakane, Nakane. And then he stepped on the stick and went, boom. I went,
fuck.
Oh, great. Awesome. We're going to fucking die.
There was, I had a chopper pilot way back in times when I used to survey in the oil field. And he was trained by Americans in the flight. You know, they do the flight exchange for the pilot exchange. So he was taught how to fly in Somali days. Yeah. When they were over in Somalia, right? Way prior to that, he was taught, but he was in Somalia. So this is what he was telling me. He was saying, in Somalia, you would have 6-year-old children with an air belly. Okay. They'd be asking for an apple with one hand. Yeah. And then behind their back, they had a 9mm. And as soon as they got their apple, they just shoot you in the head. And that's what was happening in Somalia. Yeah. And he said, I never thought that children would be weaponized to that degree ever in my life, because he actually was trained for Korea and Vietnam and just continued his military pilot career through that time until Somalia, and then he became a commercial pilot. Yeah. Right? But he said he had never ever saw the weaponization of children until in this capacity until he got to Somalia, right? Yeah. So that's kind of wild that, like, did you see a lot of that over there?
To me, the definition of what most people would consider a child soldier is a little different to me. To me, you know, and that's because I never experienced, like, actual legit, like, 6-year-old kids, you know, running around with AKs. There wasn't any of that in Afghanistan from what I saw. But I definitely the young teenage boys, like once they hit about 12, 13, we call them around the fighting age male, we call them. Okay. You know, and, you know, I don't think we ever went toe to toe with them, but, you know, Afghanistan's a very different place. You know, it's very much described as one big war with a lot of little wars in between, you know, and that honestly to me, that was because you're dealing with so many different roles from a day-to-day basis in Afghanistan. You know, one day you could be a social worker, one day you could be a police officer, the next day you're a doctor, you know. Wow. And then the next day after that you're a soldier, right? It gets, you know, it's very different, but as of the child soldier thing, you know, it did, because it was only those fighting age male type ages. Yeah. You know, to me, you know what you're doing at that point. Yeah. To me. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree at that age. Yeah. You definitely know. Like, so I worked in Chad, Africa for a little while. Yeah. And when I was in Chad, Africa, they used to say I worked with some of the locals in that area, and they would say, don't go to the Congo. At that time, it was called the Congo. Yeah. And they're like, being Caucasian, that's not a place you want to go. And we used to fly in all the time through South Africa in order to get to Chad. Yeah. And I tell you what, the second you got into Johannesburg, you stuck around with your militia, right? Yeah. Because we did have militia in Johannesburg, but we had nothing in Chad, Africa, because it's a French colony. So it was really good, right? In the context of, like, nobody was going to hold me for ransom in Chad. Yeah. But they were like, whatever you do, do not go into Tanzania and do not go into the Congo, because that's going to be not good for you, right? Yeah. Like and even the militia that was down there. So the militia was out of Calgary, and they were a bunch of joint task guys. Oh, okay. Right? Retired joint task guys. Yeah. And they would say, we will not be able to get you out of the Congo if you go there, and if you go to Tanzania, we can't get you out of there either. Like, that's a lot coming from those guys, man.
That's fucking nuts, right? I had the same guys actually in Saudi Arabia. So I did some work in Saudi Arabia with an engineering firm, and so the reason why I left, and I don't know if I should confess this, but I mean, fuck, what are they going to do to me here? I left because I was drunk. So I got drunk. And these two Joint Task Force guys came up to me and they picked me up and they're like, have you been drinking? And they're both standing side to side on me, right? And I was like, yeah, because I didn't know that you couldn't drink in Saudi Arabia. So they're like, we have to go, and I was a surveyor, so I'm falling into my fucking legs, like I'm falling into my instrument, you know. And they're like, we have to go. I'm like, I got to tear this thing down. They're like, no, you don't. We're just leaving.
We got to get the hell out of here.
So they threw me in the back of the Jeep. I thought that we would go to the compound to get my stuff. They're like, no, we'll send it behind you. We're going to the airport right now because you have diplomatic status there. You don't have shit here.
Yeah.
Right? So we went right to the airport and they flew me home. But when I was there, so if you could think of a square in the middle of the desert, right?
Yeah.
I would go out and they would ask me for the corners. 2 people would go to each corner, back to back of each other. And then they would point their rifles basically at the other guy at the other corner at a 45 degree off of him. So that if any of the sand pirates were to come through, it was a fucking killing line. Like that was it. They were done.
Left and right of Arc of Fire, man.
That was fucking crazy, right? That was my first experience with that. I was like, this is fucking nuts. Like I couldn't, and I said, they'll really take the rig? They'll take you. Yeah. Why do you think we had a code word to pick you up from the fucking airport? It's like, they'll take you. So that was pretty amazing.
That's the thing that, it's, when you finally go, like, before I joined the military, I never left Canada.
Yeah.
And then when you finally go to abroad and then you see different places in the world and, to us, how ass backwards they are. It's definitely... it's an eye opener for sure. Like I remember being in Afghanistan and everybody had a goddamn cell phone, but God forbid that anybody had any running water or fucking power coming to their house.
That's the same thing like Africa. Yeah. Everybody's got a fucking cell phone, but nobody has running water.
Yeah.
Fucking nobody.
Oh yeah. And there's like that one dude in the village that has a generator and he charges everybody to charge their phone.
Yeah. I remember with the chief, I was in the chief and we were putting power property lines in for the pipelines that we're going through. And so the chief would literally be, and we have our RTK, so GPS, real-time kinematic. Anybody in the Western world seen it. It's the stick with the dome on the top, and it talks to the satellite, right?
Talks to the mothership.
It's like GPS in your phone, just a little bit more sophisticated. So anyways, this guy, the chief is telling me from this rock to that river to that tree is the property and shit, right? Yeah. So then the chief was trying to ask us what the stick was. So we're trying to explain it as best we can. Finally, they just started calling it the fucking sun talker.
Sun talker?
That's the literal translation that they were saying, fucking sun talker. I was like, shit, if that's what works, that's what works. But again, all of a sudden, I felt like some colonialist because the guys who were giving up their property through the chief, we were taking what do you call it, like Polaroid pictures of them, and they were just put an X at the bottom of the Polaroid picture saying that this was their land and we were putting a pipeline through it. Right? Like it was like, fuck, I feel so 1700s doing this. Right? So let's talk about if you're comfortable with it, the injury and how that happened in Afghanistan.
Yeah, so I think I was like 3 or 4 weeks out. So I just got over of like 4 days of gastrointestinal. It was an awesome work week that day. Week. Yeah. 4 days of gastro.
My God.
Just hating myself.
I bet.
Yeah. In Afghanistan. So at the time, my company, we weren't actually in like full on forward operation bases like the rest of the coalition forces were at that time. We were actually in the very, very beginning stages of basically living in what we call platoon houses. Okay. So it'd be just your platoon, and then you kind of pay a guy off to buy his compound, or you take over an abandoned compound and make a little platoon base out of it.
Okay.
Right? And then you actually lived in the villages, and that was part of counterinsurgency operations, right? To try to build that trust with the locals, with them seeing you every day and then providing security.
Wow. So what I found out about Canadian military is that the reason why we're so great about tactics when it comes to how do you like? I forget what the word is. When we're dealing with guerrilla warfare, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
A lot of this comes from the Aboriginals out of Canada, because the Aboriginals in Canada were the best at guerrilla warfare that the Brits and the French had ever seen in their entire life.
Well, that's pretty much any guerrilla warfare. You're against a conventional army. Because you could camouflage yourself in anything, basically. You look just like the locals, right?
Yeah.
And that was, the Taliban were very much the same day. During the day, they'll shake your hand and pretend they're just a regular villager, and then at night, who knows what they were doing. So it that of course created a high paranoia and everything like that, right? But so that was basically counterinsurgency operations. Try to build the trust, and then eventually, hopefully, they would give you info on the Taliban, and then we would switch to basically a hard knock in the middle of the night and go arrest somebody. Or
so, what's a hard knock exactly?
Hard knock is basically kicking in the door. Sometimes we did soft knocks, which we would see if the door was unlocked or whatever, and then we try to get into place quickly. But
so we call those no-knock warrants.
Yeah, pretty much. You just basically, grab some debt charge, put it on the door, and blow her in, and there's your hard knock, right?
We're home.
Yeah. Yeah. Hello.
So here you were. You guys had taken over a compound, right?
Yeah. So our platoon house. Yeah, and it was an abandoned school actually. But yeah, so I got over 4 days of gastrointestinal, which is terrible. I wouldn't wish it on my enemy. It sucked. But you're just basically puking and shitting at the same time forever. It just doesn't stop. But then the day I felt better, we were going on patrol, and I was a bit of a dip fiend then. I liked my chewing tobacco, right?
Yeah.
And I was all excited because my barrack box was in one of the other platoon camps that was more accessible by road than ours was. We had to walk to ours. So I was going to go get a new log of dip. I was all excited. 3 weeks out, I was going to go get drunk and party in Cyprus, actually see chicks that don't look like ghosts.
Yeah.
So, I was pretty excited. And then, we went on the patrol, and everything seemed, same as usual routine. And then, we went through the town, and where the other platoon house was located was in this subdivision called Haji Baba.
Okay.
Right? It's like a subdivision of Nakane, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And that was where my sister platoon was at in PB patrol base Tombstone.
Okay.
Anyway, so we were about a couple kilometers away from there, and so there's this big road that's, well, not really a road. It's like a really large walkway. Mm-hmm. You could probably fit a small car through it. But and then there was walls on either side, and at the time what the Taliban were doing, they were putting directional fragmentation charges. So homemade ones. So you basically get a steel tube, you pack the bottom with explosive, and then you throw in nuts and bolts, and then you seal the top, right?
Fuck.
So they're hiding those in the wall. So at the time, we would basically send over 2 teams of guys. One guy would be looking out for dudes with AKs, and then the other guy would be looking along the walls, while our engineer assets would be going up the road with their mine detectors and bomb dog and everything like that. So I was the guy on the outside, and, because this was the only real way we could deal with that threat, the Taliban caught on to that tactic, and then, I ended up stepping on a baiting IED is what they like to call it.
Oh, wow.
So it was a smaller IED, and of course, we're walking along. And actually, I remember I was yelling to my buddy. He was on the other field on the other side, and he was wondering where we went because we kind of had to climb over this big 12-foot fucking wall. Anyways, we climbed over, and he was yelling at us, "Hey, where did you guys go?" There was a big wall and whatever, right? And then I looked over, saw this guy who I thought was a farmer. And, I waved at him, he waved back, and then I took a step over my left leg in the middle of this grape field. And next thing I knew, I felt my foot sink. Kind of had enough time to go, shit. And then went flying through the air.
Was that almost like instinctive? Like the thought, like shit. Like
yeah,
it was.
Yeah, it was almost like instant. Like I felt my foot sink, click, and then the shit, and then flying through the air.
Wow, that's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
You know. So after the injury itself and the right away, do you remember, like, did you end up?
I was conscious for, I would say, a half hour.
Oh wow.
So basically how that all played out after I stepped on the IED, I at that time, because you're in shock right away, it didn't quite registered what happened in my head at that time. I thought it was my buddy right away. So right away I wanted to stand up and go grab my buddy, because it was spring at that time, and we were starting to get into what we call fighting season. And fighting season is when basically all the fighters from Pakistan, all the Taliban fighters from Pakistan, start coming back for getting ready to rock and roll for the summer.
Jeez.
But it was delayed that year because it was during the Pakistani floods.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I thought we were going to get into a fight right away. So I wanted to stand up, grab my buddy, and then basically hunker down.
How many fights had you been in up to this point? Like engagements?
Honestly, there's maybe a handful. There wasn't very many. It was very much like, when we did get engagements, it was very much a shoot and scoot.
Okay.
Because we were there during the winter. For us, it was a lot of IEDs. Like their main fighting force was still in Pakistan, going through their holidays, like Eid and everything like that at that time, during the winter months. Mm-hmm. Whereas the summer months, it's all grueling. Yeah.
Even outside of the Ramadan, or even during, Ramadan?
During Ramadan they kind of stay low. That's when they go back home for their holidays, and because in Pakistan you got Swat Valley, right, the tribal lands.
Yeah.
And that's where another large Taliban president is. So that's where they all hang out.
It's crazy how the culture is just fighting. You know what I mean? Like for a lot of the men, it seems to me from what you're saying is that a lot of the culture is just like, it's like football season almost. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's the way it's dealt with, Well,
yeah. And that's pretty much the thing. So during the winter months, while, not often, like when it's not fighting season, it's always a lot of IEDs, right? Because you could do small cells and they don't attract a lot of attention.
Wow.
Right?
It's just crazy. I think that's just, I don't think that Canadians, especially Canadians, even understand what's going on over there. You know what I mean? We listen to what the media says, and we don't know anything else outside of that, really. Yeah. Because it's just a narrative that's spewed out at us.
Yeah.
And we don't actually hear from guys like you who are willing to talk off the record. You know what I mean? Like you're not here from listening to a narrative dictated to you by the government. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the thing though. Like now that the war's technically over on our end, that's there's no worry about operational security anymore or anything like that, right?
So how long did it take for you to recognize that you were missing a leg after the
So basically I got up kind of up in a kind of a half push-up stance, and then I fell back over. And then I kind of saw my hand. That's where my fingers were dangling off and everything like that. And I kind of went, oh, fuck, I think I'm more fucked up than I think I am.
Yeah.
And then next thing I knew, it was actually an engineer that actually, he was a large guy. Anyways, he was an engineer that was attached to my platoon. And he ended up body checking his way through through one of the mud walls actually to get to me.
Wow. And
running over towards me while sweeping in front of his feet for other IEDs, right? Anyways, he got to me and then flipped me over and then started applying my tourniquets.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So that's probably one of the first ultimate critical steps into saving my life.
For sure.
Was that engineer. So
how long did it take you from there to get back to Canada?
Okay, well, the story ain't totally over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, then afterwards, I kind of, because I was in shock. I didn't realize the engineer rolled me over. I thought I rolled myself over.
Okay.
But he ended up rolling me over. And then I was like, okay, so I'm fucked up right now. I'll just lay here and breathe and wait for the medic to come. And then because at the time we had to do certain drills worried about secondary IEDs, right? because this is where this baiting tactic comes in.
Oh, I see.
So they let off a smaller IED basically to wound a guy, and the first thing in your head with anybody is, I got to go help my buddy.
Yeah.
Right? But then, you get a swarm of guys coming in, and then they'll blow up a bigger IED and kill even more. Which basically virtually what happened, but at the time, guys were just coming to me. Right? So the medic, they got me back onto the road on the stretcher. And then they started doing the work to me. But another engineer, actually, that's when he started, going around basically prodding, what we call. So he takes out a knife or whatever, and then he goes at a 45 degree and starts looking for mines, right? And then he ended up finding a bigger one.
Wow.
That was like basically it was huge. It was like 3 Chinese rockets or something like that, all chained together. So,
Jesus Christ.
And what he found was the pressure plate. And usually, it was really weird because usually they do a remote activation with that, but this one they decided with pressure plate. And he said there was a bunch of footprints that stepped around the pressure plate, but none of them stepped on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy, man. I don't even know how I would respond to something like that, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like I'm in awe of how crazy that action is right in the moment. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't imagine being in a place of that amount of adrenaline and feeling like you can't move. You know what I mean? Or like not being able to react in any capacity, right? Like if I were like, that would be just crazy for me. I don't know if I'd be able to handle that mentally.
Well, and that's I think kind of where it stems to the things like PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
Where, I know with myself, I become very, very comfortable in chaos. That's where I'm probably the most comfortable. If I'm at peace, I'm not very comfortable at all. I'm agitated. I'm like kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
But with me, when crazy things start happening, that's where I'm most comfortable.
So even like in an addiction world, right? Like when I was in active addiction, my life was entirely chaotic.
Yeah.
Right? Like either this guy was coming to shoot me, or this guy was coming to sell me blow, or this hooker was working for whatever the fuck it was, right? Yeah. It was always chaos. And what I came to understand in recovery today, so I've been recovered from drugs and alcohol for 5 years, right?
Congratulations.
Last week. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. But the one thing that I had come to understand is that chaos is not in my favor. And it took me a long time to process that the chaos is just me feeling comfortable in a situation that's not supposed to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And so what I came to recognize is when I'm feeling uncomfortable, that's when I know I'm in the right place.
Yeah.
Right? And that takes a long time to switch the fucking brain
huge.
to.
I'm still dealing with it 10 years, almost 10 years after the fact. And that's the thing too, and I think that's where a lot of guys get in a really bad cycle when they come back from overseas. They're not comfortable, so they start creating chaos in their life. They start arguing with their loved ones. They start drinking more and more to help try to get them to sleep, and then that turns into, another addiction, because then they start going into things like cocaine to wake themselves up from their hangover to show up to work, right?
Yeah.
And then it just ends up in a vicious cycle until everything comes collapsing apart.
When you start using substances in order to be able to accommodate yourself, to act like a normal being, one needs to recognize that you're probably an addict in that moment.
Well, and but that's the thing with the military. It's almost an accepted thing.
Oh wow!
So it's like right from day one. When. And it partly has to do with traditions, and it partly has to go with the medical system in the military. Like drinking's always a big thing in the military.
Mm-hmm.
It's always has been, back from World War I with the guys giving them rum to basically get the liquid courage to jump over the trenches.
Yeah, yeah.
And that tradition is almost still kind of had, not so much in a battle sense, but as a traditional sense from like graduating battle school, when you get your new cat badge, mm-hmm. you got to take a shot, the regimental shot, right?
Okay. Okay.
So, things revolve around that, and then the junior ranks and everything like that, which is kind of similar to the design of a Legion, right?
Would you suggest that it was kind of like that in the cadets as well prior to you entering into the Canadian military?
Oh, well, it's kids, man. They don't condone drinking with kids.
Yeah. No, I agree, but I mean, the kids themselves, like in their own, not with the adults, so to say, but like the kids themselves, right? Like when I was young, I did a lot of drinking and a lot of
well, I think that's just part of growing up, though. Like, I grew up Mormon, right? So that was like, all right, I'm drinking, I'm getting my rebellious phase, right? I fucking hate the church, But that's I think just being rebellious is just growing up. That's all it is.
Yeah.
But I think, but when it comes to the military, and then this is where the part where it kind of goes sideways on a lot of people, because the military likes throwing Band-Aids like Percocet.
Yeah.
And it's a Band-Aid. Like, I remember, like, for 2 years, it was, and it's free too, right? So, because everything's covered.
Okay.
For 2 years, like, I really developed this, a huge dependency on Percocet.
Okay.
Right. And I think a lot of guys, guys' backs are blowing out. And that's the first thing they prescribed is, here's some Percocet.
Yeah.
You can get as much of it as you want and however often you want.
And it doesn't feel like an addictive substance. I've used Percocet before. It's not like Oxycontin where you feel like shit afterwards.
Yeah.
You feel it down from it.
Yeah.
Percocet perks you. You feel up and you feel totally ready for life, Well,
it's like, ever watch that scene in the movie Goon where Buddy comes in and the goalie's there? It's like, I have 2 rules. Don't touch my Percocet, and do you have any fucking Percocet?
Yeah.
Well, I had a similar experience with a sergeant basically saying the same thing to me as a Joe, kinda. But that's the thing, right? Percocet. The Percocet's a big thing, and they had me on Oxy and Percocet.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so I think I was on like 15 grams of Oxy a day, and then like Percocet as needed.
That's nuts.
So,
and this is when you were over there still, or here?
No, this is when I got back. This is when I got back, and I was going through my physical recovery.
Okay.
Right after having my surgeries of having my leg reconstructed, my leg finished amputated, and everything like that. So.
Okay.
And that's kind of the thing. It's almost like, the military, says that they're not for substance abuse, but it's almost warranted because the doctors will give you anything.
Yeah. And just for context too, especially for Americans, like Americans have their own VA hospitals down in the States. I don't think, do we have the same thing here?
No, what we have here while you're still serving is what basically it's just a clinic on base, right? So you have doctors that are some military doctors, some civilian doctors that are in the clinic on base, and that's where you go. And then we have our own pharmacy on base and everything like that, right?
Okay, so like it's almost like your own town, basically.
Kind of, sort of. Not to the extent like the Americans. Like, I've seen American bases, and they are literally their own towns.
Yeah. Yeah, very self-sufficient almost.
Oh, yeah, so self-sufficient.
Yeah, so as you were going through this process and going through recovery physically, right, for this injury, did you ever... So let's get into a little bit, if we can bridge the gap of when you finally had met our dear Prime Minister.
Yeah.
And... being from this recovery place. So did you ever think that the military itself, through these benefits, if you can call them benefits, I think they're warranted. Like this is what should be an assurity to any Canadian military person who's been injured in the line of duty, From then, did you ever think that you would have been faced with what you were faced with by feeling like your benefits are being taken away almost, right?
Well, it was, you didn't really actually realize it. Most people don't realize it until they actually do come under the VA umbrella or the Veterans Affairs Canada umbrella. You think the military is going to take care of you and everything like that. And then, once you get to that point where you're basically useless and not able to be deployed anymore, that's where, things start changing. So basically the benefits changed actually a few years before I got hurt.
Okay.
So they changed back in 2006 when we first started rolling around in Afghanistan, and guys started getting hurt. The government realized that, oh no, we're going to lose a lot of money. And this was the Paul Martin Liberal government that realized this. So they came out with this new thing called the New Veterans Charter.
Okay.
Which basically was almost a lip service thing, saying that they were replacing monthly payouts or monthly pensions to a lump sum pension and providing more services, which is okay in theory, but the big thing is when services ain't being reached out to those guys.
Yeah.
Guys are waiting a year before their VA file gets looked at. It's absolutely insane.
Wow.
And and the Canadian veteran population is a lot smaller than, say, down in the States.
Yeah. So let's take that into context too, because I think how many personnel do we have in the military in Canada
as a whole, including reservists or National Guard? I think only a couple 100,000.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I think too.
Yeah.
And when we put that in context to America,
yeah,
they're millions.
Yeah.
Like they have millions next to what we have.
Well,
right?
I'll put it into context for you. Like in Afghanistan, at any given time, we had roughly 5,000 troops. Only probably about 1,200 of those troops were actually combat arms type trades that were on the front lines.
Wow. That puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
When people are thinking, so why is Trump so upset with us not doing our NATO obligations? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's definitely and unfortunately, it seems to me a low priority from government.
Well, it's not a lot of people affected. Like my wife, she even said herself, because we had a conversation about this actually shortly after the Trudeau thing, and it's just not a lot of people are affected by it. Not a lot of people know veterans. My wife said the only person that I knew that was in the Army before you was my stepbrother that I never fucking talked to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing too is we don't really in Canada know, like if you go to Ottawa, a lot of people who are veterans because there's a lot of people in Ottawa who are veterans.
It's the hub.
Yeah. But other than that, you start branching away from it and it becomes this alienated subculture almost in Canada.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Well, and especially when you get here in places like Alberta where oil's big,
yeah.
At 18, I'm sure looking at the question yourself, would you rather make $100,000 a year or $30,000 a year being yelled at and, having a shitty life, right?
Yeah,
or would you rather $100,000 a year, show up just at work your 8-10 hours a day and then, get to go out and party afterwards, right?
Yeah, exactly. What life seems more applicable to the big bang buck, so to say, what I mean? So when you were going through this benefit issue with Veteran Affairs in Canada, when did you start seeing that their tune was changing? Like, I wasn't going to get this and I wasn't going to get that, and things started being taken away.
So with me, I noticed it definitely when I became sober off of the Percocet and Oxys. That was an eye opener all in itself.
Congratulations for that as well. Yeah, that's a difficult road to trudge. It's not easy.
I wouldn't call it an addiction personally. I would call it more of a dependency. I didn't get too far in. Like my wife is a recovering addict and stuff, and the challenges that she deals with were far more different than mine. Like to me, I just woke up one morning and just said, fuck it, I'm not taking it anymore.
That's it. This is done.
Yeah, and it was 3 weeks of goddamn withdrawals, and it fucking sucked.
Yeah, it does suck. Yeah. I can empathize.
But that was it, right? Like I was able to basically, have the willpower on my own to basically stop it. So that's why I call it to myself more of a dependency type thing.
That's excellent.
Yeah, but anyways. So definitely that once I was able to see things more clearly, instead of just basically as a big haze, then I started noticing things kind of go out of rock. And this was just before I was leaving the military. And, and I think the defining moment is actually when I was trying to get some benefits, and mostly they would because I was an amputee, I would get a certain set of benefits, but then because I was working full time, that's where they put me.
So why did you have to work full time?
Well, there's no medical pension, right? And I was at that stage where I didn't have 10 years in the military where you got some kind of pension, right? But I was kind of in that area I like to call the gray area.
Okay.
Haven't served long enough to get a service, like some kind of service pension.
Yeah.
But also, I was also kind of on that 3B release medical file, where on the old system I would be getting a medical pension from that. But on the new system, you just got a payout. Right? And I was 20 years old when I got my payout.
That's fucking deplorable. By our government, that's deplorable. You know what I mean? It's just to me, that's ridiculous. For anybody who's putting in a service for their life, for the freedoms that Canada provides you through our Charter of Rights, in my opinion, it's just crazy to believe that, well, you have to be at 10 years not getting injured in order to get some sort of pension. And then if you don't make this benchmark, we're going to give you a lump sum of money if you're in this in this gray area. Well,
it's not. So you're kind of like a lot of people, you're kind of getting the two mixed up. So you got your service pension, right? Which is just like anywhere else, you pay into it. That's
so it's like CPP almost.
Well, not CPP, but it's like a company pension plan.
Okay.
Right? So you pay into it, right? And then, once you reach 10 years, you could pull and you release, you could get 30% of that or whatever. And then, the ultimate number, of course, is 25 years or 35 years. I think you get 80 and then an 80% pension. And then like 25 years, I think you get 25 years, you get like 65, 70.
So on that pension alone, how many of our Canadian military actually get that pension? Do you have
anybody that serves, past the 10-year mark, right? That's a service pension thing, all right? Of course, if you get out before your 10 years, right, you get a return to contributions, and then you got to dump half of it into RSPs and everything like that. So same thing happened to me. What the big problem is the medical pension system. So basically, medical pensions were put in place because of guys, say, such as myself, or whatever, right? You get hurt, you can't do the job anymore. Who's to say that you couldn't make it 25 years, right?
Yeah.
You're hurt.
Yeah.
Right? You can't do the job anymore. Here's a medical pension. On the old system, because of losing a leg, right, I would have gotten around $2,000 to $3,000 a month, roughly.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
But now what we have is basically a payout as of right now. So on the payout, I got around approximately $200,000 for a leg at 20 years old.
Yeah.
Who's used to making $30,000 a year.
Yeah.
It was a fun 2 years.
Yeah, I bet.
And that's what I got for a leg.
So how long did you have to deal with this rigmarole, so to say, with the government in order to be afforded this payout? Did it come right away, or was there?
It came pretty quick. I was still in the hospital, and the paperwork was already being done.
Okay.
So I was still in the hospital at that time, going through surgeries and everything like that, and being high as fuck on morphine.
Yeah.
So sign here, and okay, right?
Yeah. And that's kind of strange too, right? Like, I mean, why would they be bringing you paperwork when our mind isn't? You know what I mean?
And that's I don't know. It's and it happens to a lot of guys, right? Oh, let's get you some money right now and everything like that. And of course, being 20 years old, you're just like, oh, okay, right on.
And they didn't give you a lawyer or anybody to look over any of that?
No, because you got that trust within the system, right? Yeah. You're 18 years old. You have no real life experience.
Yeah.
And, you get so institutionalized, you trust the system.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's really a one and done.
Yeah.
One and done. Here's your payment. And then there's no more.
Yeah.
So what was the catalyst, or what brought you to the point of confronting Justin Trudeau at that town hall?
Honestly, I just woke up that day, but I was reading more and more to this new option that the government's going to come out with in April of next year.
Which was what year? 2018?
2019, this new option that's coming out. And they're calling it the lifetime pension option, which was basically this hogwash of so Trudeau can say he kept his promise during the election, which is not nowhere near what he actually promised. So basically, this new thing that's coming out, it's basically, they're calling it the lifetime pension option. You can either choose a payout or you could choose to go on that. And it's a max of $1,500 a month. That's the max.
Okay.
And then, but, you know, they include your rank,
Okay.
time you served, your injuries,
Okay.
and if you're working or not.
Okay.
So they'll claw it back if you make more than $20,000 a year. So that's where I kind of went, ding, right?
Yeah,
it just kind of all clicked. I said, this is bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And so that's why I went down to...
And so why is Trudeau putting this out? Because I think there's some talk about court action, so on and so forth before this, even with the Conservative government when Stephen Harper was in power.
Yeah, so Stephen Harper the Conservatives kept to basically the hard notch. No, this is the new Veterans Charter. This is what it is. And then the election time rolled around. Trudeau
won.
Well, he made an election campaign promise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it was directly it was beautifully done. He had all his MPs that served in the military behind him wearing their medals.
Yeah.
And he started making the veteran promises. And one of them was, no veteran should ever have to go to court to fight the government. And the other one was, we are going to reinstate lifetime pension. Reinstate was the key word.
Yeah. Yeah.
To the old system where, you know, they basically just look at your injury. They look into a fact if you have a family, and they look into how many kids you have. Those are the really big ones.
Okay. Part
of that, the old system. And of course, you get more as you get more kids, you know, and everything like that. You know, they look at your dependency too, right? So if you have dependents under you, right? So like my wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
So say I died,
yeah,
right? After overtime, you know, got old and died. You know, my wife would get 80% of my medical pension from Veterans Affairs.
Oh wow!
Until she passed away.
That's pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good benefit. You know what I mean? And so that's the old system.
That's the old system prior to 2006.
And after 2006, it was a one and done.
The one and done, and then this new one coming out. You know, it's the hogwash. You know. Kind of say, oh, we did our job, but not really.
So basically, when you had come to this confrontation with him, you were trying to hold him to an account and a question about why is it that there's a per capita on the salary?
No, what I was trying to get to the point where my question was, if anybody watches the video, you can look it up on YouTube. Veteran confronts Trudeau at town hall. It was more of the fact that to me, they're giving the guys that we fought against a better deal.
Yeah.
Or the type of people that we fought against a better deal than the guys who fought in Canada's name.
Yeah.
You know, that was my argument, you know, because you gave a convicted terrorist, you know, $10.5 million.
Omar Khadr.
Yeah, Omar Khadr. And now he's doing not even stepping into a courtroom. And then he's bringing ISIS fighters back into Canada under I'll say in quotations, a reintegration program. You know, again, not even stepping in the courtroom. And then here he is spending $40 million on fighting veterans in court.
Wow.
To date.
Wow. That to me is pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can see the two hands, how they don't even come close to each other. You know what I mean? Like they're so far away from the middle ground of it. And even like I kind of remember Justin Trudeau's response. It was he totally pacified. You know what I mean? Like he just totally passed the entire situation. All he kept saying was, well, if we had gone to court, we would have paid more money than what we had paid, so on and so forth. But he hasn't actually given real answers to any of this.
So what the big answer, of course, that came out about it, of course, that was across the news and everything, that veterans were asking more than we're able to give right now.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that was the big answer out of it. But I find it funny, looking back on it now, how he stated perfectly, oh, well, it would have cost us $40 million to take Omar Khadr to court.
Yeah.
But that's how much it's costing to take veterans to court.
Yeah.
$40 million.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah. So maybe he got his script messed up. I'm not sure, right?
Yeah.
But we had a podcast a little while ago where I had a guy who trades quite a bit of money over the Canadian-American border. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the tariffs. And one of the things I have people within Trudeau's cabinet who are workers.
Mm-hmm.
They're not ministers, but they're just people that work, right? And one of the things that was told to me was that Justin Trudeau didn't know that we paid the tariffs.
Yeah.
He thought that the tariffs were paid like a tax at the border and Americans paid them in order to trade in Canada. He didn't know that when Heinz ketchup comes here, we've tariffed and taxed our own Canadians in order to buy Heinz ketchup.
Yeah.
He had no idea. He was totally blown away. Yeah. So then he had a...
Yeah, it's an extra tax when you purchase the product.
He thought Americans paid it at the border. Like, you want to send a Heinz truck over the border, you got to pay X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
No, we fucking pay for that. He had no idea.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's a totally different tax. It ain't...
the incompetency is mind-boggling. I cannot believe that. I cannot believe the incompetency.
Well,
you know,
a lot of it is, honestly, it's just he doesn't know.
Yeah,
he's never had a hard life.
Yeah,
you know, I don't. You know, I don't totally fault them for it. What I fault them for is being ignorant to the fact that,
that's right.
You know, realizing that he doesn't realize that he's not like majority of Canadians.
Yeah.
He has zero hardship of understanding what a hard life is.
Yeah, yeah. And the key word is ignorance there, because he really doesn't want to learn anything more is what it seems like. You know, I mean, I only know people who know of him because I've been in the Ottawa area, I've been in the Montreal area, so I know people who've kind of grown up with him.
Yeah.
Through older generations of mine. And he just doesn't understand what it is to be on the other side of the fence.
No.
Like he's the kind of guy who will have a fire camping and try to, well, he's worried about his green footprint.
Yeah.
Over a fucking fire.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a fire. We're not tearing down the fucking bush here. It's just a fire.
Been doing it since we've been cavemen, bud.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? Like, and there is two kinds of Canadians. There's the Chad the Canuck. You know what I mean? And then there's also the Toronto Tony, you know what I mean? Who's a lot different than Chad the Canuck.
Oh yeah, no, for sure, one thing.
But we're all Canadian.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And when we have people who are going overseas in order to fight for our values as our Canadian Charter of Rights, all of a sudden we now have this issue in Canada where Omar is getting how many millions of dollars because he was persecuted in Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah.
Right? But he was convicted as a terrorist.
Yeah.
I mean, he's convicted. And we also have, if you look at our espionage charge in Canada, if you decide to go to the other side and leave Canada, you lose your Canadian citizenship. It's gone.
Yeah.
But apparently with Trudeau, it's going to be reinstated.
Yeah.
And a lot of this, if you look at, I think, Algebra, something like that, he's out of Mississauga. He's actually been charged with being affiliated with the Muslim Brotherhood, and he's a member of parliament.
Yeah.
Like, that's who's in, and he is also in foreign affairs. He's in the foreign affairs portfolio, right? Like, we have come so far sideways in the way that we're directing our politics in Canada that it just doesn't seem like the same place politically as it once was
I
before.
think it creates major divisions.
Yeah.
Major divisions.
Yeah.
You know, whites, different other, colored people, Christian versus Muslims. It happens. It seems to be happening every day for the last 4 or 5 years. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're, and it's almost like people are almost given a choice. Well, if you're not on our side, you're on the other side. And it's like, well, no, I don't agree with you and I don't agree with you. I think you're all both bunch of crybabies and a bunch of idiots, right?
Yeah. And the division lines are getting very tribal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's where we're going. So let me ask you, after the Trudeau incident, and any of the listeners can go on YouTube and listen and see it, what happened? What was the first thing, besides the media storm, I guess?
Well,
right?
The media storm happened, right? So that was, of course, going on Global News, which is a news outlet here and everything like that, a couple newspapers. But I think the first thing right away was Veterans Affairs Canada calling me right away, since I haven't heard from them for like a year. before that. So, you know, it was them checking up and doing their little check in the box, as I like to call it, you know, to make sure I wasn't, you know, going off the rails, you know. And then after that was a conversation with the Veterans Affairs Minister, where, of course, I had my very choice words with him. And then, of course, right after that, the opposition political party, of course, buckled on right away.
Which was conservative.
Conservative, yeah.
At this point.
Yeah.
You know, what's kind of strange to me is it took a lottery shot, so to say, to get in front of Trudeau and have a question in order to actually get some sort of recognition from people who are supposed to be helping you anyways.
Yeah.
You know, that in my opinion, paints a picture of how inaccessible the rights of veterans is.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I had a case manager. Like, you usually get a case manager when you start going through the Veterans Affairs process. And, well, he was kind of an idiot. I've called him an idiot to his face, so I don't care if I say it on here. But,
yeah.
You know, but, you know, like, as soon as I started working full-time, it was like, okay, we're closing your file with Veterans Affairs. Done.
And you weren't afforded an opportunity not to be going back to work full-time.
No,
I mean,
I got to support my family, you know, like, I'm sorry, you can't live off of $200,000 your whole life. You know?
Yeah. I mean, even if you do invest it, it's not going to yield you the kind of dividends that are going to give you a Justin Trudeau trust fund.
No.
You're not getting that out of $200,000.
No.
And it's a lifetime. I mean, this is an impact in your life for a lifetime. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's not just you who's dealing with it, it's family who's dealing with it in the context of those are the memories, you know what I mean? And
yeah, like, you know, my wife, you know, God bless her soul, like, she deals with my night terrors and everything like that. You know, I don't remember them, but she's the one that deals with them in the middle of the night. You know, she's the one dealing with when I have a bad day or whatever, right? You know, but that's also another reason why I can't just sit at home and collect welfare.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
You know, especially with somebody with my own personality, I guess, you know, you got, to me, you make your own way in life.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, when you're dealing with a mental health issue or anything like that, you know, to me, you know, just sitting at home just doesn't help.
Yeah.
You know, you got to have your brain stimulated in some way and everything like that. So,
yeah, I agree. And I think being of service to others that we've been around, like, so back to the whole, you know, addicts, being with addicts because we know what it's like to be in a life or death situation with our addiction. Yeah. Us helping each other, like being of service towards each other, actually goes a long way towards feeling a purpose without asking for a dividend from it, right? It's almost, and it feels good because you feel like I say this all the time, addicts can help addicts better than those who are not addicts trying to help addicts, because we know what it is to be in the throes of death. And so I think that's almost parallel to the same to veterans in that context. You guys know how to help each other better than anybody else because you've both been behind the line, so to say.
100%. You know, like, honestly, some, you know, helping out veterans, or, you know, even just sitting down and chatting with veterans, having a coffee, having a beer or whatever, you know, brings me some of my greatest joy.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, that's definitely, you know, keeping to the tribe, the pride, right? You know, like, and that's what it is, you know, and we're all humans. And, you know, I think, you know, and it's basically like being monkeys, man.
Yeah.
You know, we all got to feel like we're a part of something.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. We all have to feel a part of that bindingness, you know? So since then to now, has this promise changed at all from the Trudeau camp?
Hell no.
No, it's still the same thing?
No, it's still the same thing. They're still going to go on with their new plan in 2019. You know, and it really scares me at this point. You know, like, to me, at the end of the day, I really don't give a shit on how much money I get. Yeah. You know, I've set myself up career-wise to be fairly comfortable, but, you know, it's the guys who are going to get out, you know, and when they look at their benefit and they're getting that benefit, and then they realize that they go start working that their benefit would be clawed away. You're going to have guys that aren't going to want to go work in the fear of losing their benefits.
It creates a welfare state.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It creates a dependency, creates a welfare state. And when you got a bunch of guys that are dealing with their head, time, and space issues, and what a lot of military guys like to do is to start hitting the bottle.
Yeah.
It ends up into, of course, what we see today. And, what I think will end up being a lot worse is the suicide issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I expressed this to the Veterans Affairs Minister, but...
And there's and I think we see that in addicts too who are becoming recovered, that suicide goes up because the sense of purpose is gone.
Yeah.
And when the sense of purpose is gone, there's no real reason to go and do that thing that you want to do the next day.
Well, yeah, and in the military, you get that, like what I said before, the core identity.
Yeah, yeah.
When you look in the mirror, you see that guy wearing that uniform.
Yeah.
And when that's stripped away and you're out of the military, and especially in the very beginning stages of being out of the military, I'd say that's when guys are probably they're most vulnerable, because they're not looking in the mirror anymore. Mm-hmm. Seeing that, badass, basically superhero.
Yeah, yeah.
And, and that's where things get very volatile. They either figure it out and end up getting their life on track the way they wanted to. They turn to a life of crime because, as we talked about on the other side of the fence, the fraternity thing, right?
Yeah.
Or, they get into a life of addiction.
Yeah.
And basically creating chaos in their own life, where it actually ends up, they end up basically taking their life in their own hands.
Yeah. It's a tragic story, isn't it? Yeah. For a lot of guys who come back, I think that's where we're really failing. You know what I mean? We're not helping people to become independently self-sufficient. We're instead trying to encourage them to become dependent upon a system.
Well, when you get into institutionalized, like, in the military, even you basically got a career manager that's going to tell you how your career is going to go for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
Right? And then when you got to go out into the real world, and this is where I found that was really difficult to basically, what do I want to be when I grow up? You got nobody telling you where you want to go. Like, if you want to, like in the military, they either tell you you're going to be a grunt for the rest of your life, or you're going to go into sniper or anything like that, right?
Get your marching orders, so to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but, in the real world, you got to make choices, and it's kind of like, oh, I don't know what choice to make, because it's like you're that fat kid in the candy store, and you don't know which candy you want first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I can definitely empathize. But I'm sure we could go on and on for the afternoon, but unfortunately our time is up.
Oh.
And is there anything else that you want to shout out there?
No. I honestly, to you, Justin, I think you're doing great work. I've heard a couple of your podcasts, and honestly, you're doing great work with it, and I hope you and Kenny doing this thing, keep on going hard. You guys are doing a great job.
I'm sure we'll have you back in, because there's some stuff that we didn't touch on that I'd like to touch on later on another episode, maybe in a couple months or something from now.
For sure.
And I'm sure that these wonderful listeners who are part of the Lions Tribe of Life on Life's Terms will be sending me some questions in regards to ask you on the next episode.
For sure.
So, and I like to thank you again for your service. It's admirable to hear how much dedication you had and still have towards keeping our freedoms free here in Canada.
It was a job, man. It wasn't. I don't look at it as anything too special.
I do, and
I appreciate that. Thank you.
My greatest respect to you. So I'm gonna do shout outs here real quick. Liam Connolly at Connolly Law. For all of your Canadian law, will estate, and media issues, Google Liam at Liam Connolly Law. He's a fantastic lawyer, and you have any issues here in Canada, he'll definitely help you get through them. You can go to our Patreon page, and on that Patreon page, you can give us suggestions for the next not-for-profit for us to do a 30-day campaign on. We just finished up with Southside Boxing Legion about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and That was a fun campaign, and we're looking at doing another one. Life on Life's Terms will always be free, and that's because we're all part of the Lions Pride here, and we will never, ever, ever ask for donations in regards, or even to pay for episodes like prior to or whatever. These episodes will always be out on Thursdays and Fridays, and they're of your benefit. Please share the word, hit that subscribe button, and tell everybody about this podcast, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday. Bye for now.